an emotion comes up, or next time it comes up, because it will, if you can give it a hug and get in the habit of that. Sometimes for me, it's less of a hug. It's like that emotion like wants a seat at the table. And I'm like, you can have a seat at the table. You're just not sitting at the head of the table, right? Like instead of like, go away, instead you give it this hug. The more you can get in the habit of that, the more the strategy is going to work. Because then you start to remove the shame from the strategy. So then when you write a list, you just write a fucking list and you do it. Because you're like, this is just the same thing, what I do. The same way I wash my hands after I touch raw chicken or clean my socks after I wear them, right? None of those have shame in them. So you just do them.
Hey, y'all. In this episode, I selfishly wanted Martha Hoffman to give me a little bit of coaching. I'm constantly in the question of, is this ADHD or is this just a lack of adulting? Is this just a lack of executive functioning skills that I should be learning as an adult? I got the privilege of getting to be kind of coached in real time by Martha. She's a fantastic coach. I've gotten to work alongside her on, content creation the past year and a half. And she's consistently illuminating things for me, helping me be kind to myself and helping me get past some of the executive functioning challenges and or emotional challenges that come with not wanting to cooperate with knowing how my brain works. So I hope you guys appreciate this session that I got to have with her, pretty much a live coaching session. She does group consulting. She does work with groups, especially women with ADHD and or moms. So if you are one of those people and you have ADHD, this I imagine would be a similar experience to what it might be like working with her. Without further ado, hope you enjoy. Hi, my name's Zach. I'm your favorite mental load coach. I teach men, sometimes women, to better understand invisible labor. When it comes to domestic labor, mental load, emotional labor, I got you covered. I teach men emotional literacy and fluency. I bring guests on that for us to have conversations to improve our understanding of these concepts and these topics. Sometimes we're going to agree, sometimes we're going to disagree, but the main goal is for us to improve those conversations. Welcome to the Zach Thinks Your podcast. And hey, if this is not your first time on here, I kindly invite you to leave a review or hit the follow button if you haven't already. Look forward to sharing this with you today. Hello and welcome to the Zach Thinks Your podcast. Today I have with us Martha Hoffman. Martha, I've been working alongside you, helping you stay accountable for making short form content for a good year and a half now. But the whole entire time, as you've been sharing about ADHD coaching and the work that you do with women and folks that have ADHD, all the time, I just want to pick your brain about is this really about being an adult and having general responsibilities, needing technology and stuff to get shit done? Or am I neurodivergent? So what I'm selfishly taking this time today to do is to pick your brain on what's the difference between a regular adult experience and someone that has ADHD, because I know that I procrastinate a lot. What I can't tell is it a normal amount of procrastination or like an ADHD level? I've taken medication before. I stopped taking it because I didn't love who I was becoming out of it. So I'm going to introduce you and you tell me where I'm missing. So you're also a fair play facilitator. I think the first time we ever met was we were doing a role play on one of the facilitation calls. You coach mostly women and some couples on how to improve the strategies that they're going about dealing with their ADHD, but you're generally an ADHD specialist that you could work with anyone, not just women. You're an educator. You've worked with special ed groups, and you're also a content creator, helping the everyday ADHDer thrive in life more. What am I missing? And a mom.
Yeah, I have 2 daughters. I
And
was
a
an
skateboard
educator.
enthusiast.
I'm learning how to skateboard at 43 years old. That is true. I was an educator for a long time in K-12 education, but I still teach. I'm adjunct, teaching folks about all things neurodivergence, literacy, language, things like that, at a variety of universities. I think everything else you got. Yeah.
So I'm going to dive into like what feel like simple things that feel like probably impact me, I think, a little bit more as someone that I mean, I've been diagnosed with ADHD, but there's still some moments where I'm like, it's just adulting that I'm not good at. Um, I struggle, like in the new house that we moved into, there are very few cabinets, but there's open shelving. And at first, I loved that there was open shelving. I was sweet. I can see everything that we have. I don't have to wonder where it is. I don't have to open things. I'll just see it. Versus like Alyssa is like, that's very cluttery. Like, I don't want to look at all that. I just want to see like some nice wood. I don't want to see 15 different dishes that we have in that area. And similarly, I was working earlier today on creating effectively like a large spreadsheet that helps me track my tasks and like accomplishments throughout the week and the month so that I can track my progress. And it also gives me a little bit of dopamine to like check the box, like I did a thing today. How much of being able to see it all out in front of me, so it's in like one large space. Similarly, like I know that I really appreciate seeing like month-wide views of a calendar rather than day-long views. How much of that is ADHD versus being an adult or like a human?
Yeah. Great question. What's interesting, which is probably not where you thought we were going to start, but this idea of like, somebody might say like, you're a visual learner. That's why you like to see it all. But actually learning styles, that idea of like visual learner, auditory learner, kinesthetic learner is actually a myth. So that could be a whole other conversation for a different day. So it's not really that. That idea of being able to see it all is a little bit ADHD because it's helping your executive function. It's minimizing the cognitive load you need to like make a decision. You're like, I can see it. This is what's coming. Or on a calendar, especially, you can see it all in front of you and make sense of it all in front of you versus trying to hold all of that in your head. Now, could that also be challenging for somebody without ADHD? Of course. But like with many things, when you're just trying to decide adulting or ADHD, it's like the intensity, the persistence of it, and then really how disruptive is it to your life. So if it's like mildly inconvenient, but you can get by, you just prefer to have a large visual calendar like I have in my background here, that's one thing. But if you cannot if you cannot make it to appointments, keep a calendar, be held accountable without a big visible system like that, then you might be looking at something more like, okay, is this part of ADHD or executive dysfunction?
Yeah. So like another feels like a good example here of this. One of the things that Alyssa has asked for me to own more of, something very simple, is filling the cat dish with water. So historically, she owns the feeding of the cats, and she's been, while pregnant, less mobile and going downstairs less. She noticed very often just little bits of dry cat food that gets gross in there. She's like, "Can you own this?" As I heard that question, my first thought was like, where am I going to develop the self-awareness to do that? Because it's going to be stupid for me to put it on an alarm. That will certainly help me. But if I'm not in the right place when the alarm goes off, I'm not going to remember it more than 3 minutes later. I'm like, literally, how am I going to remember this? Because it's so like, am I going to put a sticky note? And 3 days later, the sticky note's going to blend in with the rest of the surface. Like, that's not really going to help me. And then I realized, you know what? It would probably be really helpful for me to focus on the general morning tasks. I get lost on Instagram sometimes when I don't intend to, is just making a list, which I recognize I have some shame about even needing a list to function in the morning efficiently. I can function, just I'm much more efficient when I have a list that says, make lunch. Here's the general opposite. Here's some options for lunch to put together for a kid, so I don't have to like think about it. I'm just reading it. Feed the cats their wet food, switch out the water, like make the coffee, fill up the milk bottle for our child. It was kind of painful for me to write out that list and admit to myself, this would probably really benefit you, Zach, to just write it out and have this like in a very easily accessible place. Probably not out because I don't love my handwriting and it doesn't really fit the decor of the kitchen, but maybe being able to flip open one of the cabinets and just see that there. Now, my first thought is it feels like a 101 adulting skill. Morning routines, like remember to do regular shit. But at the same time, it occurred to me that like maybe the pain of by writing it down, I now have to face the potential pain of shame of like, you suck at remembering how to do regular shit. So I guess I'll come back to ADHD or adult.
Yeah.
And I think the answer to your question is going to be spectrum. If you literally, I'm betting your answer by now is like, Zach, if you go downstairs to do morning routine and you come back up having done one of the seven things, probably ADHD. And then like if you that persists and until you get a list, then you probably have ADHD, but it's maybe a little bit less ADHD, more adulting. If you're typically able to do most of it, but like you miss a thing or two.
Yeah, yeah, and again, like, I'm not a diagnostician, right? But, yeah, there are some things that swing one way or the other. One of the things first that you named that I have to talk about is the shame, which is really prevalent with folks with ADHD, shame around all of it. Not being able to do it the way we're supposed to, quote, unquote, "supposed to," or should, or the way our sibling could, or the way our parents wanted us to, or whatever, and that just, like, sticks with us. There's a lot of numbers out there around like a kiddo with ADHD gets something like 80,000 more negative comments before high school than a kiddo without ADHD. A lot more criticism, critique, even just feedback that isn't critical, but we take it as such. So, shame is huge. It's a huge thing that I work on with my clients because one thing is like being aware of how their ADHD shows up. And then there's this acceptance piece. And the acceptance piece is where we have to dig into a lot of that shame. Like, what are you making it mean that you need a list, right? I heard you say, like, I shouldn't need a list. Like, if we were coaching together, I would dig in there a little bit. Like, what are you making it mean that you need a list? Um, the other thing that probably happened there with the list is you either in a moment of urgency or energy were like, I'm going to organize everything I have to do now and I'm going to put it in one place. Your brain was being smart. Let me get this out of my brain and put it onto a post-it instead, rather than every morning having to muster up the energy and mental organization to be like, wait, which is it? What comes first? What are the 7 items? You took some urgency or energy, maybe both, dumped it all into something that worked, and then got it in one place. It's a smart strategy. Again, it works for folks that are not neurodivergent as well, but that's probably decades of your brain knowing where it needs to find shortcuts and, having the intelligence to say, I can find an efficiency here, let me do this, instead of not only forgetting tomorrow morning one of the 7 things or 6 of the 7 things, but then also beating myself up about it and then starting a shame spiral, right? Like all of those are related, for sure.
Yeah, because I think that yeah, I'm thinking about, so you said this is what you would work on with your clients is like identifying the shame. So dig in with me. So I think the reason that I feel like I shouldn't need the list, I think my brain goes to Zach, you're 34 years old. So I think it goes to this like conception of what it is to be an adult, which is like
Mhm.
you're able to, you're not, geriatric and like you have a general working memory. Like, what am I trying to say? So Zach, you're 34 years old. Like, get your shit together. Like,
Okay,
is
hold
the
on. Can I
negative
pause
self
you?
talk? Yeah.
Yeah, let me pause you though. First of all, you said all this talk about like adulting is great because like I feel like my tagline is like I help folks with ADHD like adult with more ease. So it is interesting today that we're talking about adulting versus ADHD. So you're a responsible adult. That's what you said. Like you should be like a quote unquote responsible adult. And so my question is, writing a list is irresponsible, or the
I,
need for a list is?
yeah, the need for a list feels like I'm using almost like a crutch that I feel like I shouldn't need.
Okay. And so when you use that crutch and you notice someone else doesn't need it, what emotion comes up?
Life every day. Um, like I'm less than like, I mean, I think probably I shoot her. Well, she's just better at this than me.
Mm,
She cares more than me.
what emotion?
Like it's sadness.
Mm.
Definitely some like loneliness of like, wow, this is like a problem that I have to deal with that she doesn't need to think about. Like it feels like basic executive functioning that, yeah, what is the emotion there? It's not hurt, a little bit of lonely, a little bit of sad. I think some fear of like, and by the way, I'm like running through my connection codes, core emotion mode here. A little bit of fear that like I'm gonna have to forever use a crutch to like function what feel like basic ad- adult responsible parenting pet owning tasks. Yeah, shame that I'm less than, n- not so much guilt, maybe almost like anger that this is like what my brain needs or something.
Do you feel any of the fear, shame, sadness, loneliness, anger in your body?
Trying to like revert back to a memory recently of like Alyssa being like, can't you just remember?
Mm.
Yeah, like my chest a little tight, like my solar plexus, like my stomach almost like drops a little bit. Shoulders a little tighten up a little bit, and or like they're like tight, but like they're kind of lowered in like sadness.
Is there a movement to it in that space?
Yeah, it's almost like the way your like shoulders move, like when you take a like a sad deep breath. Like
Yeah. Does that sensation that you feel, shoulders, chest, stomach, have a color or a size?
first one that comes to mind is yellow. A size. Uh, Give me a little bit more on the size.
Is it big or small? Is it flat, round? Is it textured, bumpy, smooth?
Feels like a like a gradient or something. Like it's like sharp really quick and then
Mm.
very quickly kind of fades off. Um, or I'm imagining something almost, I talk about people being stuck in the do better loop, and there's like that moment of, dude, like I said, I would do that thing. Wow, I just can't remember, but she remembers all the time. And it's like an anger, shame at myself, and then it turns into, I've never heard this question before. The shape of it.
It's okay if there isn't one.
Okay. I mean, the thought of like the gradient is like maybe a fading triangle of sorts.
Okay. Does this yellow gradient need something from you? What does it need to hear from you?
Tears are coming to my eyes. I'm not sure. I mean, first thought, best thought, is wants a hug.
Mm.
And, it reminds, I was a special ed teacher too. It kind of reminds me of like those moments when one kid would look over at the other and be like, oh, well, they don't need their calculator. They don't need their times tables. They don't need this like extra scaffolding to do like seemingly normal grade level work.
Hmm.
And almost like yearning for the competence or like the skill set or the habit or something to not need that. But just kind of sinking back, recognizing I need my own version of training wheels for this. I'd like to think the teacher in me was able to give that kind of hug to them, like, hey man, like it's okay to use this, like it's just what you need. And if you want to get the grades that you want to get, like knowing the way that you work, like this is what you need. And yeah, maybe just like a hug to myself and knowing like it's okay to write a list. I definitely don't need Alyssa to make lists for me. There's also that fear sometimes of like, all right, I'm gonna write a list. Am I gonna read it? Or am I gonna be too, sometimes I feel like I almost become too arrogant that like,
Mm.
oh, I don't need this. And then I
Yeah.
inevitably miss something.
Well, I'll tell you that if that yellow gradient emotion comes up, or next time it comes up, because it will, if you can give it a hug and get in the habit of that. Sometimes for me, it's less of a hug. It's like that emotion like wants a seat at the table. And I'm like, you can have a seat at the table. You're just not sitting at the head of the table, right? Like, instead of like, go away.
Hmm.
Instead, you give it this hug. The more you can get in the habit of that, the more the strategy is going to work. Because then you start to remove the shame from the strategy. So then when you write a list, you just write a fucking list and you do it. Because you're like, this is just the same thing what I do. The same way I wash my hands after I touch raw chicken or clean my socks after I wear them, right? None of those have shame in them. So you just do them.
It's interesting.
What's coming up?
So as you're comparing something like washing hands after raw chicken, I do I take that action because I see, there's the fear of salmonella has been
Uh-huh.
firmly implanted into my brain from our culture and from home ec and freshman
Yeah,
year of high
growing up in
school.
the 90s and aughts, yeah.
Yeah. Um, and I mean, I guess there's a tiny bit of fear connected to it. I mean, actually, it's more like gross. I'm like, my hands are all slimy. Like, I'm going to remove that. But it's hard for me to map the needing a list, the executing on reading a list, and then doing the things on the list, and then saying, okay, I read the list. It's hard for me to map that thinking process
Mhm.
and doing process on the same like emotional plane as washing my hands after handling raw chicken. Maybe because it's a very physical experience versus a cognitive one. I'm trying to think of what else. Like this morning when I was working on my giant spreadsheet
Mhm.
post-it note, I was 2 minutes late to my office hours this morning for the guys that I work with, and I came on. I acknowledged my guilt. I acknowledged my shame. I showed them what I was all excited about what I had been working on, and they were like, "Oh hell yeah, I need one of those." Um, but after I made that mistake, and then I had this call later in the day, there was a moment I went to go work on it again, and I just really quickly went over my phone and said, "Hey, set an alarm for 11:29." Um, a minute before this call started. It wasn't hard for me to drop the thing. There was no shame associated with me setting up that alarm, knowing that it would help me. But potentially maybe like some fear. Hey, I don't want to, or some guilt. I don't want to do that again. Here's a super easy thing I can just implement, like a 6-second task. But it's interesting thinking about how I have an emotional reaction to the making a list and remembering a new thing like changing the cat water versus throwing on an alarm onto my phone to show up to a call on time. And
Some Go ahead.
I think the difference I'm noticing, one, because we're in a capitalist society, it's connected to money, it's connected to professional relationships versus the remembering to fill the cat water, not connected to money, potentially. I know Alyssa has a much heavier shame experience of watching our cat not drink water or like approach it, be grossed out and walk away. I think she has a pain experience of like potentially witnessing that or like knowing that they're not getting enough water, versus I don't think too hard about the cats ever, until they start annoying Alyssa because she's fed them for years. So they bother her rather than me. Um, so I'm noticing that part of it is I didn't feel shame over using a tactic that's going to help me in like a corporate, it's not a corporate setting, but like a professional setting versus using, and you know what? I'm realizing this might be partially like the cultural devaluing of domestic labor. Is I think some of the shame is connected to that. I was like, oh, domestic labor is easy. Like you just do it. You just remember it. Like there's no, it's not connected to money. You just is what keeps coming out
You
of my
just.
mouth. And like being willing to recognize that no, you kind of don't just, you got to use the same job skills that you use in your day job to be successful and show up on time and ready. You got to use those same exact skills to do all the other things that exist in your home because your
Yeah.
brain actually works pretty much the same way. Culturally, it's been taught to think of it differently emotionally, but for the most part, your brain needs the same prompting, needs the same tactics to accomplish
Right. Because
similar
you're the same
things.
human in your home as you are professionally. But, yes, somewhere along the way, for you, either using a timer got coded as okay and writing a list didn't, or using a strategy for professional is deemed okay and using a strategy for basic day-to-day skills is not. For in somewhere, somehow that got coded in you, whether it was your socialization or whatever. And so, yeah, it's kind of teasing that apart and undoing that so that you can benefit from those strategies across the board. Because shame is just not a really great driver. It can be for a minute, it can be temporarily, but if you're trying to make sustainable change, shame is not a really good motivator. So trying to separate the shame from that, which is what we were doing there, right? When you said like some emotion was coming up, to just, even if you don't ever look at writing a list like, yeah, this is great, you could at least get it to neutral, right?
Yeah.
Even neutral
Yeah.
would be great and make it much more functional for you. You would resist it less, and then it just works better for you, which ultimately is the goal. But, not having to go down the shame spiral along the way is also an added benefit. Um, it's not lost on me too that I'm talking to you as a man and we're talking about like societal expectations. If you're a woman with ADHD, the expectation is even higher that you have
Mm,
your shit together at home and
yeah.
as a parent. If you forget to put your kid in snow boots right now where there's snow outside and you're a dad, like people laugh. If you're a woman, they judge and potentially call Child Protective Services.
Yeah. I
Like
was going to
the
say that.
standard is also very different. So just to women listening, right? The recognition
Yeah.
that it's there for all of us, but for women with ADHD, there's this double-edged sword of this is that much harder for me, what other people see as basic day-to-day tasks. And that's everything from the cat water to brushing teeth to washing your face as a woman is probably more important if you wear makeup, and it's like all the things. And then to the executive function that goes into meal planning and school schedules and all the other things. If that is hard, like that's what it takes, as you know, to run a home and a family. And if you're in an inequitable house where the woman is expected to do the majority of that and you have ADHD, it's a recipe for disaster
Yeah.
without support.
I'm really curious. I feel like I want to hear more. Like I know Libby Ward, like Diary of an Honest Mom. I think she talks about things like this where she experienced neurodivergence and ADHD, and while I know there's videos out there of like men, it feels like weaponizing competence for me sometimes because like again I know logically. I don't always know emotionally, but I know logically. I was like, I just need to put in strategies that work for me at work, at
Mm-hmm.
home. Um, and shit, where was I going with this? I know logically that I need to do that sometimes. And I know that, hearing men then say like, well, I have ADHD. I'm not going to remember that is like, again, like the stakes are seeming like from a cultural perception perspective, the stakes are lower. They're effectively the same, but from a perception, they're different.
Yeah,
Um,
women don't get to opt out.
right.
I mean,
And
men shouldn't and really don't either,
right.
but yeah.
Yeah, from like a social accountability standpoint of people judging, like they don't, yeah, there's no opt-out option. And I was back in the fall, I remember there was a really powerful moment that I was grateful that my coaching and my personal life were able to collide in that. We're getting ready to go for like an outing for the day. It was to a fair. Alyssa said like, "Hey, can you manage like the morning?" And I didn't do a good job clarifying and or double checking that I received the handoff well. Either way, I forgot her jacket. It was like, it's a cool fall day. Weren't sure how cold it was going to be. We're 20 minutes into the 40-minute drive and I realized, oh, I forgot her jacket. And Alyssa was quite upset. And what we recognized was what I was proud that I was able to hear from her rather than being defensive was really angry. She felt hurt. She felt lonely.
Mhm.
And historically, I would have been like, we'll just get a jacket there. Like historically, I would have been like dismissive, but
Yeah,
I was able to see that when we get in the stroller and if she walks by someone, like if Alyssa's operating the stroller, mom gets judgment versus dad is not going to get the same judgment walking by.
100%, 100%. And often when there are things that happen with my ADHD that I am perceived as either a ditz, like kind of dumb, or a bitch. Right? Like when I'm overloaded in a sensory way, I've learned now, right? Just like I can say to my kids, like, I'm overstimulated. Like, you got to put headphones in. I can't have that sound in the background or whatever. But leading up to that, it would be more of a snapping moment. And then I'm seen as a bitch because I was trying to juggle too much and I couldn't handle it, right?
Right.
Or like I said, there are moments of it looking like I'm unintelligent, right? And that came up a lot when I was in school ages too, where I was struggling to perform because of my ADHD because the conditions weren't right. But I was a girl, so it was like, "Oh, she's just not that bright. Oh, she's a great personality." Oh, like just really awful things that people said. What I was supposed to be. Quiet, calm, kind, witty. I wasn't. I was like a loud ass running into things, hyperactive child, which I should say, often ADHD in women and girls does not present that way, but it did for me. Um, and it stood out. People were like, "Ooh," I got like a lot of that. My parents would get like invited to parties as long as they didn't bring their child. Like it was a thing. Um,
When you say it
yeah.
doesn't present in women nearly as much that way, how does it often present?
Well, for one, anyone where hyperactivity, so ADHD comes in 3 categories, like, medically now. There's either inattentive type, hyperactive type, or combined. And for anyone where hyperactivity is part of it, that's most prevalent when you're younger. Sometimes that can decrease as you age, but also the hyperactivity is more prevalent in boys. So with women, it's often inattentive, or actually it's hyperfocus, and the hyperactivity is also often internal. Our brains are hyperactive. The things that are happening inside never turn off or go at lightning speed or only have 2 speeds, like on dialed up full volume or like off, can't get out of bed. A lot of intense extremes, one end or the other. And while I have experienced that as a kid, I was also physically hyperactive. Like I was just the kind of kid you had to run to get her energy out. That part is less common in young girls, which is why it often gets missed in girls because they cope, well behaved, kind, smart, all of those things. And then they hit either puberty or pregnancy or postpartum or sometimes perimenopause, and hormones exacerbate things. It all falls apart. And then they finally get a diagnosis instead of the original diagnosis, which is usually you are dramatic or anxious or depressed or have bipolar. I mean, all sorts of crazy misdiagnoses because we just haven't put a lot of time, effort, resources, funding into ADHD in girls and women.
Now, I found it really delightful and kind of you to kind of hold that space for me to do some of that internal work. And I know that's definitely the kind of work that you do with your groups of women. But my first thought is like, what are the tips and tricks that you're teaching people to do? And I'm also thinking, I don't, I don't know if that's actually what you end up like offering around coaching. What kind of things do you guys work on?
Yeah.
Um, I'm imagining like being able to think about the emotions around why you're not choosing certain coping skills that would really benefit. What else is
Yeah, I
there?
think there's a lot of great strategies out there. Like, I don't want to knock a coach or a practitioner that
Right.
offers strategies. I also think there are Googleable and, AI generated strategy. Like, there's a lot of stuff out there. But number one, I think strategy without like your brain and body being on board doesn't really help, which is a little bit of what we were dipping our toes into. I also think like a lot of the ideas of like quick hacks are, they're quick hacks for a reason. They work for a moment and they're not sustained. I also think there's this idea of like, this is a quick fix. And I fundamentally, to my core, believe that if you have ADHD, you are not a problem to be fixed. And I think a lot of what we're sold is like, here's how to fix you. So with all that said, I'd say my coaching is unique because I am doing some stuff around managing your mind. Like when I said to you, what are you making it mean that you
Yeah,
need a
that was
list?
powerful.
And then some somatic work, right? Like where's it showing up in your body? We are very intense feelers emotionally and otherwise. So it's like so often that's looked at as a negative, but I'm really trying to leverage that as a positive. How do you then use motion to process things, right? You don't always have to talk and think everything through, especially if you're an overthinker. So sometimes you can scream it out, punch it out, dance it out, and things like that. So the mind work, then that somatic, like body based practices first to see where it is. And then, sure, there's some strategies sprinkled in, but really it's that awareness and acceptance first, and then perhaps moving into action. I think the biggest mistake we can make is just wanting to act right away without real awareness of like, hang on, how's it showing up in me? Why am I like a top performing, CFO in this huge organization and I can't make sure I have clean socks? Like, what is that discrepancy? And really digging in first to the awareness and acceptance part, examining the shame and the other emotions that come up before we jump into action. It's a process.
What do you think is one of the hardest self self-taught questions that we're typically unwilling to ask ourselves
Mm,
that you help people have the courage to ask themselves? I think for me,
great
probably the
question.
most powerful one that I think you kind of forced out of me earlier there was, what are you making that mean? And or what's the emotion that you're experiencing when Alyssa doesn't need a list and you clearly need a list?
Yeah. Uh, that those and other flavors of like these shoulds. I swear every time I do a first call, I should start tallying how many times people say should, because that's so much of what it is. I should be able to do this. I shouldn't need help. I should be on time. I should have gotten a promotion. I should be making more money. I should, all of them. So a lot of questions examining those, like who the fuck's shoulds are these, right? Like let's dig deep here. Um,
Do you use
I
that line that I love using?
which
Stop
is
stop shitting on yourself.
stop shooting on yourself. Yes, awesome. Often. Um, Which is funny because if you close caption it, it often misreads that one. Um, a lot of one that's been coming up a lot recently is like, do you like your decision for that? So, like, I had somebody last week that was talking about a decision at work that she had really been going back and forth and back and forth. And I said, let's just decide right now. I kind of believe whatever choice you make is the right choice. Let's make a decision. And I said, in the future, like, let's examine. Do you like your do you like your reasons for that decision? And she was like, oh, if I'm not making this decision to please my boss, avoid getting in trouble, protect myself from potential embarrassment. Like, if I'm just making this choice because in this case it was what was best for her students, then she felt like she had the resilience to deal with whatever else happened. Because I'm like, your boss could get mad no matter what you do. So let's stand behind the decision and kind of internally source that instead of externally. And because we are so steeped in shame, I find that that's a lot of the work that we do as well. And then you didn't ask this one, but I have to share it. I think for folks that I have access to that love someone with ADHD. So not the ADHDers, but the partners or parents or kids of them. One of the reminders I give is like, however frustrated you are at them when whatever happens, they are 10 times as frustrated with themselves. Like they know.
Mm.
So they may not seem like it, but we know that we're a lot or difficult or frustrating at times. So a reminder for them not to add to that shame because again, it's just not a great motivator.
We're gonna put a link in the show notes here. If people want to work with you, if people want to tear up like you had me, but in the first like 10 minutes, where how do I get a hold of you?
Yeah, Martha Hoffman Coaching. So that's me on Instagram. That is my website. I do one-on-one. I work with couples. I run small groups for women. And my podcast is ADHD in the Real World. And I have in a very ADHD spirited way, random topics over there. Some, short 5 to 7 minute episodes, some longer interviews, and we tackle all the things. So Martha Hoffman Coaching or ADHD in the Real World is the podcast. And Zach, I want to ask you, which I try to do all the time when I'm talking to people, what is one thing you wish people understood better about ADHD?
I mean, I think the thing that I learned today was that there's a lot of similarities to adulting, and knowing that there's a spectrum of some people that are just like they can't do any of the things without those strategies versus like being able to do some of them. I think that was powerful for me to hear, because there are some moments where I'm like, I have way too many things and I don't know the strategy that's going to help me work, like wedge into something. It's usually just like journaling it out or just like
Mhm.
stream of consciousness and whatever comes out of my brain. Um, but I think the thing that I would want for people to better understand about it is that it's not I think for the guys that use it as an excuse, like it's not an excuse.
Mhm.
um, but is going to require regulating some shame for us to be able to probably get past and not be completely owned by, but being able to take ownership.
Yeah, for sure. I love it.
Martha, thank you for having on. Thank you for letting me be selfish and use you as a coach in real time. I'm glad that I've gotten to know you over the last year and a half pretty well, and I feel like I've learned a lot from you in a lot of these times. So I'm hoping that someone listens to this and hears themselves and is able to have some new clarity. And yeah, I'm hoping some good things come from listening to this.
I love it. Thanks for having me, Zach.
All right. Bye, Martha.
Bye.